It has just begun.
Good morning, noon, evening or night, depending when you're watching this video. My name is Legend and welcome back to World of Tanks, but not so much the game itself, but the lore about it. And yes, we are going to look again at Mirny. So about a week ago I uploaded the video The Story of Mirny Hope, where I tried once again to accumulate all the information that you can find about the event and make a story out of it. And while making the story, I still got a lot of questions and theories. I wanted to discuss those in this video and take a further look about the lore and theorize as well at some of the elements we get to know with this new story. But first I want to thank all of you who have watched the previous Mirny video. Not the one of this year, but the one of previous year that I made around half a year ago, with already nearly 4,000 views and a lot of reactions as well, which really motivated me to make these videos closer after the actual event. But for now I really want to explain this kind of lore story further, since there is so much interest for it. So let's get right into the questions and theories. In the story, what I found really confusing when I first heard it is that some kind of rift wasn't closed off in 1946. So I looked back at my story from previous year, from the Halloween event 2020, and I couldn't find anything about 1946. The earliest year was 1952, where the barium was discovered. So I really liked the idea or the theory that maybe during World War II or closely after, there was this rift in Azagir, because we know very little about Azagir, the wasteland we know from Steel Hunter. What actually happened there? We know the proving grounds, which, well, is basically Steel Hunter, but I get the feeling that more is happening there. So I would like to see that Azagir might be yet again a connection to this story. And I really like that this is the origin of the Miriam matter. It's quite a good theory that it entered our world through this rift into the oil deposits and was only discovered 6 years later when digging for that same oil. I actually want to add this little bit into the story. However, the story of Mirny Hope, I wanted to do it as much factual base, because it was a bit of a theme that it was a report from Agent M, the undercover agent, really making it look like a report. But of course, eventually it led to some personal worries about Hope and what was going on. So I really like that I still added some subjectively observations from Agent M in there, because he was really worried that, well, the things that might happen in the future. But we will come to that later. Next is the change of the character in Hope, and this was a thing that eventually led me already concluding right before I saw the last reel where she got those eyes, of what actually happened to Hope herself. Because I think that it's all because the Miriam influenced her. I actually stated that in the story as well, but I'm really convinced that's the case, because in the beginning, she was really this more kind-hearted. I mean, there was a slight change, noticeably, because she was just doing her job, wanting to, well, help out, like really wanted to get some scientific breakthrough, but by helping out. She was getting the Miriam from Merkulov first. After that, she did the experiments, and that influenced her. And after those experiments, we saw the reel where she began to have some higher tensions with Colonel Gromov, where she was really agitated and really wanted to pursue that, well, that scientific breakthrough. Where I said in my first update from, wow, that's a bit of a switch in morality. Like how she switched towards being somewhat of the bad guy. And in the end it was hardly confirmed. So that was an interesting thing to see. So I really think that due to the Miriam experiments, she got influence. The exact moment was in the real when she did analysis on the spectral field, like the light that was glowing. The light, of course, being something never seen before, but right at that moment she said, "What are you?" Like she was convinced that she was actually asking a question towards another being.
Converting the glow to the spectrum. Starting to decode. Damn, what the hell are you? There are no parallels within any current references of spectral lines of elements.
Like, and that switched her mind or something like that. That moment, I think, was the moment that she was influenced by the Miriam. And further on, she thought, well, I have a plan now. I have to, well, do its bidding. I don't know if it was just instant, like hypnosis or mind control or something like that. But after that, it was just, oh, it's, well, the same conclusions of the spectral analysis. We have never seen that color before of the spectral analysis. And then she began to have high tensions with the colonel, began to tamper with the Goliath tank, which was really immoral because of the risks. So I think that was the whole shtick of her being, well, being the good guy at the start and being eventually the bad guy through some kind of hypnosis or mental influence or brainwash. I don't know. I don't know exact that detail, but I think that's how the story went. Next, oh, the King Tiger. This was a big retcon in this story. I was really trying to to put the King Tiger into the story, but I really think that Wargaming just haphazardly put it in, not really thinking about the correct storyline and just having it in there so they could, well, sell it, or they could promote it easily, make it more popular, so that people would really grind out the game mode, which is weird because the game mode itself, it was just fun enough and it was quite easy to get it. But the King Tiger does a lot of harm to a chronological story. In the story, or either the reels or, no, not the reels, but in a separate article, it was said that the request of the information of the rift, which we saw in the reels, was because they discovered an active King Tiger captured in Mirny. But that request was before the incident, and the King Tiger has been in custody after the incident, because in the story of the King Tiger, it was said that the King Tiger and its commander got the footage from the pretty much destroyed Goliath tank, which had that camera mounted at the last moment because Hope requested that. And, well, returned with the footage, which we actually saw Hope using and determining the weak spots of the Immortal.
It can be destroyed. Take this video. Get it to Hope. She needs to see it. Get it to her.
I will. Thank you. I will get this to Hope.
Achieve total victory.
So yeah, also when the footage of the Immortal with his weak spots were collected, was it just different footage from Alexander? Alexander was the commander of the King Tiger. From Alexander in the King Tiger, and the footage later of the Immortal in the introduction video. So that is really the confusing part, because it didn't seem in the trailer, in the first trailer for the event, that it was the King Tiger who provided, or Alexander who provided the footage. That can still make sense, that because the story with Alexander was that Hope asked him. Hope does have a lot of connections, by the way. So Hope asked Alexander as acquaintance or good friend or colleague at some point, or I don't know. She asked Alexander to investigate in Mirny, so he went there on foot for some reason. I don't know if that was a good idea. So then he found the King Tiger tank, and then he rolled around trying to gather information and eventually encountered Group 36, which was the group that led the Immortal towards the Phase 0 or the new phase, which is also a bit confusing which phases were at which time, but that was that same group which led the Immortal towards the phase where the weak spots were located. However, the footage couldn't be retrieved back by the Goliath tank and its commander, so it was given towards Alexander in those stories. But, well, it doesn't make sense in the combination of the article, the explanation due to the discovery of the King Tiger in Mirny. It led to the request on further information about the rift, but the information about the rift was before the incident, and the King Tiger with its footage and such was, of course, after the incident, after that footage was made, so it doesn't really make sense. So, to make it a bit logically, I think it's best to just ignore that bit of the article that due to the discovery of the King Tiger, and just the reasoning behind the request of information was for another reason. Like maybe Colonel Kromov was trying to investigate more information about the surroundings, found something about maybe Azagir, maybe that was the location of the rift. It hasn't been confirmed, but it is a fun theory, so he can use that. He can discover something about Azagir and the classified information. Maybe something got to him which led him to think from, hey, there is more happening there, let's request something. That is a far logical explanation, and we can still have that bit of good storyline from the King Tiger left in there. So just ignore that article, I guess, and well, that way I just could still implement the King Tiger in the storyline, but it hadn't that much of importance after all. It did fine. I think the story did fine without the King Tiger. It was just a detail. Actually, the story could also have done fine without the mentioning of the rift in 1946, but well, that were just some of the choices I made. So, moving on towards the next. The amount of Miriam collected has an impact on the ability to pull enemy forces through different phases. So, this is a really interesting theory. We know that Hope, of course, tampered with the Magnus settings, so that, of course, also has an impact on whenever an enemy tank is being pulled further towards the next phase. But I also think the amount of Miriam that is collected has an impact, because I think the amount of Miriam was the catalyst which allows the pull of the enemy forces through the phase. So the Immortal, because you have to remember the Group 36 was the first group which also had different settings to their Miriam collectors, which Hope tampered with in order to collect more Miriam. So that Goliath tank, which the Immortal came in close contact with, had a lot of Miriam that, in combination with the proximity of the Magnus, is the reason why I think that the Immortal was pulled towards phase 0. Let's talk about those phases a bit. Because which phase has the Immortal visible weaknesses? Is that phase 0 or phase 4 in a new area of phases? Because in the game mode itself, you have to go through 3 phases to encounter the Immortal in a 4th and final phase. So I think that the Immortal was led to phase 0. There, this discovery was made that it had weak spots. However, maybe in retaliation, the Immortal influenced the current phase 0 and created 3 alternative pocket phases, I don't know, between them. So you had that phase 0, where the Immortal was pulled through, and maybe the Immortal was thinking that it was a bit too close to the real world and he was too vulnerable. So the Immortal might have created the additional 3 phases to hide behind. And when enemies are eventually trying to destroy him, they had to go through 3 separate phases, still weakening those groups and giving still the Immortal a chance to stay strong in its defense. That's the only explanation I have so far. The previous information of Mirny from last year, from 2020. So in this year they are actually continuing the operation right after it was somewhat resolved. In previous year it was explained that the operation was stopped completely and it was considered to continue afterwards. Maybe that information from previous year was just a fake, a farce to let people believe that there is no further tampering going on right now, but maybe in the future, which also might give some doubts about, well, should you really do that? But they actually continue right after it got resolved with further experimenting. And I get the feeling that they're already experimenting further instead of letting it rest and continue in the future. That is what I've written down. So it's a different resolve of the Mirny incident. Or it's still, and that can also be the case, it's still the end phase where they still need to redeposit all of the pure Miriam back into the old deposit. So there is still peace. And only the ghost town, which we know as the map ghost town, is the only thing left. But that might not be the case though, because we have hope, of course, and hope has a weird look in our eyes, which makes me think that this is going to be a thing next year, or maybe something else next year, because that's also a final point when I want to talk about, and that is what is going to be Mirny in 2022. Because I have 2 potential options that could happen. A sequel towards the Mirny events, the one of this year and previous year, or a prequel of these events. And the prequel, I called it Genesis, would actually explain the first outbreak of the rift, maybe in Ezekir. And maybe in Ezekir we might see the first instances of those things. Also, which I'm rambling and I'm just thinking about all kinds of things at the same time. Also, don't you think that the tanks in Mirny, the enemy tanks, are very similar aesthetically wise as the Steel Hunter tanks? Maybe some food for thought, and maybe also an interesting theory. Maybe the first tanks that were encountered were those from Steel Hunter, and the enemy tanks in Mirny adapted on those things, being a bit rough around the edges, having all kinds of thingy-majingies. The general aesthetic is kind of similar, although Mirny has some more creepier aesthetics, of course. But again, on the basis of the chassis and turret, it's quite similar. So maybe we see in the Genesis, Mirny Genesis, a first outbreak in might be Ezekir, where the rift might have occurred, which I still really like that idea. I really like that theory. I keep repeating it. But also there might be another mode, another form of Mirny, and that is Mirny Exodus, the sequel towards the current 2 Mirny events that we have. And that is that it will spread out through the world. And that I think purely because the eyes of Hope might indicate that Miriam might get more influence and infect other people, higher ranking officers, and so spread throughout the world like a pandemic. How fitting. So how the Genesis, Mirny Genesis, the prequel, well, might be the Mirny game mode in the map Azagir, which would be amazing. I really like to see on such a big map a Mirny type of game mode. But with the Exodus, with the sequel, there will be playing the same game mode on different maps all across the world, like Secret Line and El Alouf, and we can see all Mirny happening all over the place, and well, how it got resolved eventually, or how it led towards the apocalypse, but we don't know that, of course. So that has been pretty much all of the points about Mirny Hope I wanted to make. But some last things I want to say before I end the video is that I've actually missed something from previous year, and that is the Kovalev diaries. And it was a similar thing to what we have now with the sound recording, with the recordings of the King Tiger and its Commander Alexander. But this is the diaries about the investigation. I haven't really read through them that much, I don't really have the time. But it goes from October 3rd, 1963 throughout October 25th. So it really is going more in depth with the start of the whole fucked up thing that happened to Mirny. So maybe I will also make a video just having it read out and make some kind of story in it. It also is mentioning Azagir again, so I'm really curious how that actually will pan out. So that might be also a thing that I still need to do. And last thing I want to talk about is the potential of getting more videos about more lore, because I get the feeling that World of Tanks lore is expanding more and more. We have already the Waffenträger event with Max von Krieger having a connection with Steel Hunter, because Max von Krieger was the same guy, and that video also got a lot of views and interest. The whole reason why I make this video and the story of Mirny, like I said before, quite short after the event instead of half a year, was because about the amount of view and likes and comments it got on previous videos about those stories, about those lore. So please like this video as well, put some comments in. I really like to explore the World of Tanks lore further, and I still got a lot more lore to explore about. Let me see the Battle Pass lore. I haven't even touched the Battle Pass lore, which also got some interesting points. We got the tank reward for merit, having a connection with the black market even. So there is a lot of, well, strings attached to different game modes, which is really fun to explore and really fun to theorize about. So with that out of the way, I hope you liked this video. Leave a comment, ask me anything, or just put your own theories inside there, and maybe I will discuss them in a later video with the whole lore of World of Tanks further explained. And with that, that's the end of the video, and I will see you next time. Laters!